and welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is the top 20 cards from the year that I think that were missed, or were missed by me for sure. They were cards that sort of flew under the radar, cards that didn't really get a lot of buzz, possibly got a mention from other channels, other content creators. You know, I can't watch them all. For me, though, these are all cards that didn't appear on any of my lists for the year, any of my top 10 or top 20 lists. And they're cards that are all very playable in the format, especially, again, you know, the niche cards I sometimes really like where it fits really good in certain scenarios. Those cards are always going to see lots of play in the format because there's always going to be those decks that are being built over and over and over again. So all of these cards are cards that, again, for me, I haven't mentioned on any videos this year, but I think definitely deserve a mention. So starting out with number 20, Immersturm Predator, 2 black and a red, Vampire Dragon 3/3 with flying. When Immersturm Predator becomes tapped, exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard and put a +1/+1 counter on Immersturm Predator. Sacrifice another creature. Immersturm Predator gains indestructible until end of turn and tap it. I just love all the different things this guy is doing. I think you could put this in any deck and it's going to be very usable for you. First of all, it is a dragon and it is a vampire. So you could put this in both Vampire and Dragon Tribal, and it'd be a great fit. It's graveyard hate, and I love graveyard hate. You know, it's always going to be usable in a game. It's rare that you're going to play a game of Commander where someone's not doing at least a little something with their graveyard. You're also putting +1/+1 counters on it, so fits in a theme there maybe. Also, I love the fact that it is protecting itself. It's sacrificing another creature, so maybe fits in an Aristocrats type of theme, but my opponent board wipes, I can, at the very least, save my Immersturm Predator because I sacrifice another creature that's going to die anyway and turn it indestructible so that it then survives. And then on top of that, I'm tapping it, so now I get to exile a card from a graveyard and make my Immersturm Predator bigger. Also, it can, in a pinch, your opponent's about to reanimate that giant creature out of their graveyard. You know, if you're in a desperate situation, I can just sacrifice another creature to turn my Immersturm Predator indestructible and tap it to then exile that card that is about to get reanimated, right? Everything there is just working so great together. I think this card could probably go in a lot more decks. Coming in at number 19 is Tundra Fumarole, 1 red snow sorcery. Tundra Fumarole deals 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Add a colorless for each snow mana spent to cast this spell until end of turn. You don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. I really like this card a lot. I threw this in a deck, and I ended up putting Snowlands in the deck. You know, it was a mono red deck. I put Snowlands in the deck just for this card, right? It's that easy. The snow mana thing is not really, it doesn't hold you back at all. And I just really like it. I love the value of, I can kill, early in the game especially, I can kill a creature, and then if I spend 3 snow mana, 3 snow covered mountains essentially, you'd have to tap. I get all 3 of that mana back. Now, it is colorless, so you do have to be careful there. Maybe you want to do this turn 4 where I can tap 3 lands and then I still have a red mana so that I can cast my commander after I cast the Tundra Fumarole. Also, though, I can cast my Worn Power Stone. I can throw down a Mana Rock or something. Just great value to be able to do all of that in one turn, especially early in the game. Coming in at number 18 is Ill-Tempered Loner, 2 red, Human Werewolf 3/3. Whenever Ill-Tempered Loner is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to any target. I mean, we all know there's lots of cards that do this that go in lots of those decks where you are dealing damage to your own creatures, right? I punch myself, stop hitting yourself, those kinds of decks, the stuffy doll kinds of decks. This is just a fantastic fit in there. On top of that, though, you can pay 1 on red. Ill-Tempered Loner gets +2/+0 until end of turn, and it has Daybound. And when it flips, it turns into Howlpack Avenger, 4/4 werewolf. Whenever a permanent you control is dealt damage, Howlpack Avenger deals that much damage to any target. And you can pay 1 on red. Howlpack Avenger gets +2/+0 until end of turn. So it has that ability, on all your stuff, which is really good. So any of those decks, again, the niche cards like this that aren't going to fit in a ton of decks, I just love cards like this in the format so that when I make that stuffy doll deck or that enraged deck or whatever the case may be, this is just such a fantastic fit in there. Even, I'm just in a mono red deck and I cast a Blasphemous Act. Whenever a permanent you control is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to any target. You could end the game that way, right? You're dealing 13 damage to each of your creatures, and then you can shoot all your opponents with the damage that's being dealt to your creatures. Really fantastic fit in a lot of like a Teralf deck, any kind of deck like that where you're already doing a lot of that stuff. Just a fantastic fit. Coming in at number 17, Sylvan Anthem, green and a green enchantment. Green creatures you control get +1/+1 whenever a green creature enters the battlefield under your control, scry 1. So, you know, again, I didn't mention this card in any list. There was so many great cards from Modern Horizons 2 that this just didn't make the cut. Definitely is a very playable card in the format. I'm sure it got a mention from somebody. It definitely deserves a mention. I think it's fantastic in a mono green deck especially, or even in that deck like the Arasta deck that I made where you're creating green tokens. It's extra good because every time you create that token, it's ETBing and you get to scry 1 on top of the Anthem effect. Just a really great card for a green deck. Coming in at number 16, Morbid Opportunist. 2 and a black human rogue, 1/3. Whenever one or more other creatures die, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. I'm embarrassed to say that I skipped over this and that I missed it. Definitely I think it probably could have made my top 10 lists. I'm not sure what I would have took off. It is a great card. That phrase, this ability triggers only once each turn, which I'm going to make a whole video about that's very interesting. They just started doing that this year, for those who don't know. That ability can be a little off-putting, but as I've realized with my Denic deck, which says that's not the case at all. Denic, triggering only once each turn in a commander game means typically 4 times per turn cycle. So if a creature dies on your turn, you draw a card. If a creature dies on an opponent's turn, you get to draw another card. Really fantastic card that can go in a lot of decks. You could really throw this in any deck, I think, and get some pretty decent card draw off of it. Extra good if you're in a deck where you are sacrificing your own creatures or destroying your opponent's creatures, I think. Coming in at number 15, Plumb the Forbidden. 1 and a black instant as an additional cost to cast this spell. You may sacrifice 1 or more creatures. When you do copy the spell for each creature sacrificed this way, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. I really like this card, and I like this card. It almost made my Strixhaven list, and then I realized it's even better than I thought because you're guaranteed to get the 1. You don't have to sacrifice any creatures with this. You can just cast it, sacrifice 0 creatures, and draw a card and lose a life. So it's never going to be dead that way, I guess. But then, of course, if you want to sacrifice 10 creatures, now you're going to draw 11 cards. I just talked about Village Rites in my cards that I think are a little overplayed in the format. Plumb the Forbidden is way better, in my opinion. Yes, it costs 1 more, but everything else is essentially the same, where I'm going to sacrifice a creature, right? If you sacrifice 1 creature with Village Rites, you draw 2 cards. If you sacrifice 1 creature with Plumb the Forbidden, you draw 2 cards. And then I can sacrifice 3, I can sacrifice 4, right? It has huge upside. And for me, I want cards that are going to be impactful in the format. That's why I don't like Village Rites. The huge upside to Village Rites is I draw 2 cards. That's the only upside. The upside to Plumb the Forbidden is my opponent cast a board wipe. I can sacrifice my entire team at instant speed and refill my hand. I just think that's fantastic. Coming in at number 14 is Robe of Stars, 1 and a white equipment. Equipped creature gets +0/+3 and has equip 1. And 1 and a white equipped creature phases out. This is another card that I'm kind of embarrassed that I missed because I really like phasing in the format. I think it's great. It is a way to get around anything, right? It is a way to protect your commander or whatever creature that protects it from everything. Phasing out protects from everything. Protects from any kind of removal, any kind of board wipe, a cyclonic rift, you name it. Your opponents just can't target it or affect it at all. It's as if it doesn't exist. So the fact that this is, and it's a white card too, you don't see that. I guess you got the Fairy's Protection, but other than that, phasing typically is a blue thing. I guess they're sort of moving it into white a little bit. The fact that this can be a really, really great way to protect your commander. If you're in any deck where you really want your commander to be protected, this is a great way to do it because you just leave up 2 mana and nothing can affect it. Coming in at number 13 is Hostel. I don't mention lands on my videos a whole lot. This one I think is just lots of fun. It fits really well into any theme where you're sacrificing your creatures anyway. You tap it to add a colorless, and you can pay 1 and tap, sacrifice a creature, put a soul counter on Hostel. Then if there are 3 or more soul counters on it, remove those counters and transform it, then untap it, activate only as a sorcery. And of course, if it didn't say that, it would be really good. It would be man, I would be putting it in all my decks. The fact that you can just sacrifice in response to your creature getting removed, I think that would be too good. I'm actually totally okay with the activate only as a sorcery. And when you flip it, it becomes Creeping In, a 3/7 artifact creature horror construct. And of course, the art is just fantastic here, right? It's just this hotel that is essentially turning into a monster that's now coming after your opponents. Whenever it attacks, you may exile a creature card from your graveyard. So again, great synergy there where I'm sacrificing creatures. So I'm filling my graveyard and then I can exile those same creatures that I already sacrificed. If you do, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of creature cards exiled with Creeping In. And of course, that is cumulative. That's a cumulative ability where if I keep exiling creatures, the first time it's 1, then it's 2, then it's 3. So if I can keep doing this, then it's going to build up and build up. And then as an added bonus, you can pay 4 and Creeping In phases out, which I love. Again, with the phasing, I really love it because you can protect it against everything. And it's a great way to hang on to that cumulative, I've exiled a bunch of creatures from my graveyard and I don't want to lose all that value. So if your opponent tries to remove it, you can just phase it out. And when it comes back in, it still sees all of those cards that it has exiled. So just a great card. It can even be a little bit of a finisher, I think, in a lot of decks. Coming in at number 12, Smoldering Egg, 1 and a red Dragon Egg, 0/4 with Defender. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a number of Ember counters on Smoldering Egg equal to the amount of mana spent to cast that spell. That's important wording there, of course. Then if Smoldering Egg has 7 or more Ember counters on it, remove them and transform it. So you need 7 or more Ember counters on it. So if you have a 7 mana spell, you're going to flip it right away, right? That's just, I cast one spell and then it flips. Probably that's not going to happen a lot, but I can cast a 3 mana spell and then a 4 mana spell, right? Got to be an instant or sorcery, but still 3 mana and then the next turn of 4 mana. I think that's completely reasonable. And then when it flips, it turns into Ashmouth Dragon, 4/4 dragon with flying. When you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Ashmouth Dragon deals 2 damage to any target. I like that a lot. In a Spellslinger deck, that's super good. And I know a lot of people might say, oh, well, doing 2 damage to each opponent is maybe better if you're in that sort of, storm off deck, because it's going to kill your opponents a lot faster in a commander game. But I like the 2 damage to any target. It really can be valuable to be able to, hit your opponent's creatures, maybe even their planeswalkers. I love that. The versatility of I can throw that damage around anywhere is really, really good, I think, in a deck like that. Coming in at number 11, Carhar Commando, 1 and a white, human soldier, 3/1 with flash. And having flash on a card in Commander, of course, is fantastic. Pay 1, sacrifice Carhar Commando, destroy target artifact or enchantment. And again, this is a card that I was going to give a mention, and I didn't, mostly because of Outland Liberator, which, is doing a very similar thing in the very same set. Pay 1, sacrifice, destroy target artifact, enchantment, but also has that flip side that is even better. You're very limited on controlling that daybound, nightbound thing. So maybe I don't know how good that card actually is. Is Carhar Commando better? It's a tough sell. I like the flash for sure. Nevertheless, whether it's better or worse, it definitely is a fantastic card and a very playable card in a commander game. I've already chucked this into a couple of decks. I love the flash. I mean, a 3/1 flash creature for 2 mana ain't bad. The fact that you can sacrifice, destroy an artifact or enchantment. Again, these abilities stapled on creatures are always way better because now I can, some sort of recursion effect, which I do in my Denic deck. This is such a fantastic fit there where I can sacrifice it, get that clue token, and I have recursion effects where I can get it back, use it again. Really great card. Definitely going to be a commander staple for a long time, I think. Coming in at number 10, and I just got to give this card a mention, even though it's not very exciting, and that's why I didn't put it on my top 20 list from Modern Horizons 2. Ignoble Hierarch, 1 green mana Goblin Shaman 0/1, has Exalted, and you can tap it to add a black, red, or green. So, of course, if this card looks familiar, it is because it is the Jund version of Noble Hierarch, and that card gets played quite a bit. This card, I think I saw that it is one of the, if not the most popular card from Modern Horizons 2, which, the fact that I think the top 3 or 4 cards from the year for me were from Modern Horizons 2 and none of them were Ignoble Hierarch. I think there's a lot of cards that were way better. I think this is a case though where people automatically slotted this into their Jund decks. Just an auto include there, I guess. Or even if you have a 4 or 5 color deck, because it is a mana dork that adds 3 different kinds of mana. I think it went into a lot of those decks. I mean, it's a mana dork. Not a lot to talk about. It definitely is going to be a card that we're going to see in the format a lot for a very long time. Not exciting, but it definitely is doing what it does really well. Coming in at number 9 is Storm-Kiln Artist, 3 and a red, Dwarf Shaman, 2/2. Storm-Kiln Artist gets +1/+0 for each artifact you control and has Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, create a treasure token. So this is a card that got a lot of buzz from a lot of other people. I saw it on a high on a lot of top 10 lists from Strixhaven. Again, for me, Strixhaven was one of the best sets for Commander of the Year. One of the best sets for Commander all around. There was so many good cards that this just didn't make the list for me. Is it a little bit of an oversight on my part? I don't know. I mean, I just thought the fact that it seems like it wants to go in an artifact deck, but also seems it wants to go in a Spellslinger deck. There just wasn't a lot of great synergy. I understand that the treasure tokens you are making your Storm-Kiln Artist bigger. I get that. That's, to me, not a huge upside there. I think that's just a little bit of an added bonus. I think a lot of people are putting this in their decks for the fact that it's giving you treasure tokens. Getting 1 treasure token every time I cast an instant or sorcery spell for a 4-mana creature, that's okay. I mean, it's okay. It's definitely usable in a lot of decks. The fact that it's making treasure tokens, just like I talk about with Academy Manufactor, there's going to be a lot of decks, and this is why I'm giving it a mention and I have it relatively high on my list. There's going to be a lot of decks going forward that are going to care about treasure tokens where this is going to be a great fit. So I definitely think it deserves to be in a lot of those decks for that reason. If I'm just putting this in my deck because I want like some one-time ramp or something, I don't know about that. I think you want to play this more specifically in a theme that it fits. Coming in at number 8 is Rushed Rebirth. Black and a green. Instant, choose target creature. When that creature dies this turn, search your library for a creature card with lesser mana value, put it onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. I mean, again, this falls into the category of there was so many great cards from Strixhaven that this sort of got bumped off the list. I think it definitely deserves a mention. It's really fits nicely, I think, into a lot of Golgari decks where you're already doing a lot of sacrificing, and I go get stuff out of my library and put it into play. I mean, this is a tutor, right? So it's not a great tutor. It's very limited in what it's doing, but it is a tutor. I go get a creature out of my library and put it directly on the battlefield is always going to be fantastic in Commander. Just like with Plumb the Forbidden, I love I'm going to lose my creature anyway, so why not, I hold up 2 mana. My Commander's in play. My opponents are going to want to remove it. Why not hold up 2 mana? And, my Commander costs 6, so now I can pay 2 and go get a 5-drop out of my library and put it directly into play. Great value there. And also, if you have a specific creature that you want in your deck, you even can set it up. Like, say, if I have a Stuffy Doll deck, I don't know if you're going to do that in black and green, but as an example, if I really badly want my Stuffy Doll, I can just have a 6-mana Commander, play my 6-mana Commander, and then sacrifice it and go get my Stuffy Doll and put it directly into play. You can use it that way as well if there's a specific creature that is really, really important to your deck that isn't your Commander, right? Coming in at number 7 is Phantom Steed, and this one I really think flew under the radar for a lot of people. 3 and a blue, Horse Illusion, 4/3 with Flash. Again, with that Flash, I really like that on a Commander card. When Phantom Steed enters the battlefield, exile another target creature you control until Phantom Steed leaves the battlefield. So this is like an Oblivion Ring effect, but for your creatures. However, when Phantom Steed attacks, create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of the exiled creature. Except it's an illusion in addition to its other types. Sacrifice that token at the end of combat. So there's a lot of things happening here, and I have put this in a couple decks already. First of all, the Tanawa deck that I made for my patron, I threw this in there because I thought, okay, your Commander is phasing out your lands. So if at some point you don't want your lands to be phasing out, I can flash this in, exile my Commander, leave it in exile, that's fine, because this is a leaves the battlefield trigger to bring my Commander back, so there's no way it's going to get stuck there. And then, now my Commander's exiled, I don't have to worry about my lands phasing out. And when I attack, I get that 7/7 trampling token that's also going to be connecting, so I still get that. I thought it was a good fit there. I threw this right in my Tishana deck because my Tishana deck is an ETB deck. So now I can exile that Eternal Witness that's already in play, and of course, cards like that, once they're in play, unless you're going to be blinking them lots, they probably aren't going to be giving you a ton of value. Now I can exile it, and every turn I can attack with my Phantom Steed, get a token copy of that Eternal Witness, and get something out of my graveyard. And it's also a sacrifice at the end of combat, which is also important. So now if I have that sad robot, I can exile that, and every single turn, it's going to come into play, get me a land, sacrifice at the end of combat, so I get to draw a card. So really great value I think you can get out of this. Take a look at your deck. See if there is some options where you can fit it. Coming in at number 6, Battlemage's Bracers, 2 in a red equipment. Equipped creature has haste. That's always really usable in a lot of especially red decks, right? Has equip 2, and whenever an ability of equipped creature is activated, if it isn't a mana ability, you may pay 1. If you do, copy that ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. So if this ability seems familiar, of course, it's because it's very similar to Illusionist Bracers, and I just talked about this in my cards that I think desperately need a reprint video, because Illusionist Bracers has never been reprinted, and it is a very important card in the format, I think, because of all of the commanders with activated abilities, and Battlemage's Bracers is another option there. Is it as good? I don't know. I mean, it's red, so you can only put it in red decks, so it's not going to work with all those blue commanders with activated abilities, for example. It's giving haste, though, so it's also, you have to pay the 1. Illusionist Bracers, you don't have to pay anything. So here you have to leave up the 1 mana. That's not that bad. Also giving the haste, you can use it right away. So in a way, it is better. It's great because it's another option, and it definitely deserves a mention, I think, because it's a card that can go in a lot of decks of any red commander that has an activated ability. Coming in at number 5, Welcoming Vampire. That's right, I did not mention this on any of my videos this year. 2 and a white, Vampire, 2/3 with flying. Whenever one or more other creatures with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. So I'm giving this card a mention. I think it definitely deserves a mention. It's a great card in the format. I didn't think it was good enough to make my top 20 list for Crimson Innistrad Vow. That is a fantastic set. There's a lot of great cards. This didn't make the cut for me. And man, I saw one channel saying this was the best card from the set. I saw the guys from the Command Zone talking about how this is the best white card since Smothering Tithe. Yikes. I think we're going a little overboard, guys, here. This is the phenomenon that I see a lot, and Cartographer's Hawk I will give as an example, where everyone's like, oh, it's a white card that's ramping. That's so fantastic. Whenever you get cards in white that are ramping or drawing cards, everyone tends to lose their mind. As a white player, right, I'm giving you my objective opinion here based on the fact that I play a lot of white, okay? Welcoming Vampire for me is a good card. I might put it in 0 decks, okay? I have 2 mono white decks, okay? My Patron of the Kitsune deck is a life gain deck. I have not a lot of creatures that have power 2 or less, right? This ability is very limited. It's only creatures with power 2 or less, okay? I'm not putting it in that deck because I'm probably not going to get a lot of draw off of it. I'm also not putting it in my Sigrid deck, okay? And my commander has power 2 or less, but I don't have a lot of creatures in that deck, period. So it's not really a great fit there either. So, for someone who plays a lot of white, I have 2 mono white decks. I'm putting this in neither of those decks. I might put it in my Denic deck. I might give it a try there. I do have a lot of small creatures in that deck. My commander, though, again, when I disturb my commander, it comes into play as a 3/2. I'm not even getting a draw there. So the draw here, yes, I know it's mono white drawing cards, but it is so limited. It is only power 2 or less, and it is only triggering once each turn. And yes, the triggering once each turn, again, I'll use Denic as an example. That can be really good if you can get the trigger on other opponents' turns. How many mono white decks are you going to be having creatures enter the battlefield on other opponents' turns? I don't think it's going to be happening that often. There are specific decks where that works. In an Afara deck, where I probably want to be casting, creatures on my opponent's turn so I can be getting that trigger from my commander, I think it's a great fit there. Are those creatures that you're casting going to be power 2 or less? Maybe not, right? Now we're into that scenario. So you are confined on several different areas here where you have to have a creature with power 2 or less, and also it only triggers once each turn. I think a deck like Akim, if you have an Akim deck, I want to be creating token creatures on my opponent's turn, to get the effect from my commander a lot. And Usually tokens are going to be power 2 or less, so I think it actually is a great fit there. I'm going to try it out in my Denic deck. Am I going to get a decent amount of draw off it? I don't know. For me, I think it's a good card. Obviously, the comparison here is Mentor of the Meek, and people will be like, oh, well, you don't have to pay the 1. Sure, but in my Shanna deck, as an example, which I have Mentor of the Meek, I think Mentor of the Meek is better in that deck because I got lots of mana. It's a white-green deck, and if I make 4 tokens, I can now pay 4 mana and draw 4 cards, whereas with Welcoming Vampire, I'm only going to get 1 draw off of it. As a white player, a guy who plays a lot of white, I'm not losing my mind over this card at all. I think it's okay. Definitely going to see a lot of play in the format. I think it's probably going to see too much play in the format because a lot of other people seem to think it's probably way better than it actually is. Try it out. See how it works for you. You know, are you going to be drawing lots of cards off of this? Are you going to be drawing cards off of this every turn, right? If I'm playing this card, am I going to draw a card, at least on my turn? Am I going to play a creature with power 2 or less on every one of my turns to draw a card? If you are, it's definitely worth it, no question. Other than that, though, you got to be careful here. You know, I understand that white has problems drawing cards. I did rank it high on this list, though. It is number 5 because I definitely think it's a good card and it is going to see a lot of play in the format, but maybe it's already getting a way more buzz than it probably should. Coming in at number 4 for me is Prowling Geistcatcher. And again, this is another one that I'm like, man, I can't believe I missed this. 3 and a black human rogue 2/4. Whenever you sacrifice another creature, exile it. So already we're in a theme where you want to be sacrificing creatures, right? This is not a dies trigger, right? If your creatures die, this does nothing. It only works with sacrificing, but I mean, how many decks are sacrificing their own creatures in Commander? There's a lot. When Prowling Geistcatcher leaves the battlefield, return each card exiled with it to the battlefield under your control. So I just love a lot that's going on here. First of all, I love that token part because the token part gives you value because obviously you're not going to get the tokens back with the other ability. So doesn't matter what you're sacrificing here. If I'm sacrificing tokens, I get counters. If I'm sacrificing, you know, a actual creature card, it's going to get exiled and I will get it back. It is a leaves the battlefield trigger, so there is no way you're not getting this. Unless your opponent has a Stifle, there's another great use for that card, right? And I mean, obviously this can be like, again, I talk about what's the ceiling for this card. Typically, I'm sacrificing stuff. I'll get some value, you know, put some counters on it, get some creatures back. But the ceiling for this card is huge, right? Because now, I mean, again, we'll talk about the dream scenario here. I have a sneak attack in play, okay? I have a sneak attack. I pay the 1 red mana. I throw a giant creature in play. It attacks, and I sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. You know, that's the important wording there. The sneak attack is going to force me to sacrifice that creature at the end of turn, and then it will get exiled with my Prowling Geistcatcher, and I will be able to get it back. So it's really good with any of those sort of scenarios where you have a sacrifice at the end of turn sort of trigger. Works really great there, I think. I think it's a really interesting, fun card that also, again, has a really, really high upside. Coming in at number 3 for me is Blacksmith Skill, and I know this card doesn't look like much, but man, have I been putting this in a lot of decks. 1 white mana instant. Target permanent gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. If it's an artifact, creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. So, you know, a lot of people, myself included, probably look at this card and go, I'm not playing an artifact creature deck, so what do I care, right? Just ignore that. You know, unless your commander is maybe an artifact creature, which can be the case, just ignore that. This is 1 mana. I give any permanent I control hexproof and indestructible. That's amazing. It is just a fantastic way to protect any permanent you have. I put Rebuff the Wicked in all my mono white decks and a lot of other decks as well to protect my own permanents. And this is maybe better. This I might start replacing because hexproof and indestructible, obviously there's not a lot of situations where your opponents are going to be able to get through that. They can still bounce it. They can still, you know, merciless eviction where I exile all permanents. There's no targeting there. Not a lot of situations where Blacksmith Skill isn't going to work. And again, it's any permanent. So if you have a Smothering Tithe in play that your opponent really wants to get off the table and you don't want it to, now you can give it hexproof and indestructible and you're going to be just fine. You know, again, I've been putting this in a ton of decks. I think a lot of people should probably be throwing this in decks where you have either your commander or any permanent that you want your opponents not to be touching. It's just fantastic for that. Coming in at number 2 is Malevoleni Hermit, 1 and a blue, human wizard, 2/1, and you can pay 1 and sacrifice Malevoleni Hermit, counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 3. So right away, that's a great ability. A lot of times you have those game-winning spells, the expropriates, the insurrections, rise of the dark realms, those kinds of stuff. Your opponent's probably not going to have an extra 3 mana kicking around because they're already spending a ton of mana on that spell. So this can be an absolute game saver. And it can also be, I'm just making my opponent sweat a little bit, right? They have just a normal, I want to cast my Soul Ring even. Are you going to pay 1 blue and sacrifice it? I probably wouldn't, but you could if you wanted to, right? So it's going to make your opponent think before they dive into casting that non-creature spell. But also the added bonus here is it has Disturb, 2 and a blue. And of course, you want it to go to your graveyard, so the sacrifice ability is playing into the Disturb ability, where if you really want the backside, if you don't care about the front side so much, now you can just pay the 1 and sacrifice it to counter anything, somebody's mana rock. And even if they pay the 3, you don't care. You just want your Malevoleni Hermit to go to the graveyard so that you can play the other side. And the other side is Benevolent Geist, 2/2 Spirit Wizard with flying. Non-creature spells you control can't be countered. That's really good. And of course also has the, if Benevolent Geist would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it. So if you're in a deck where you really, really want that flip side, non-creature spells you control can't be countered. I know there's a lot of people out there that are playing Krosan Grip and cards like that are, in my opinion, suboptimal just because they're a play group or whatever likes to throw around lots of counter spells. Here you go. This is a great solution to that problem. Non-creature spells you control can't be countered. So again, now I can just sacrifice that front side to whatever. If I really want the backside, sacrifice that front side to somebody casting their mana rock. If it gets through, whatever, don't care. You just want to disturb it so you can get the backside, because that can be super advantageous for you. I think both sides are great. Both sides of this card are very usable. I think it goes in a ton of decks for sure. Did this card get a lot of buzz when it first came out? I don't know. I think this is a card that could definitely see a lot of play in other formats like Modern, for example. I didn't hear a lot about it. I think it's great. It's definitely going in a few of my decks. But coming in at number 1 for me is Moon Blessed Cleric, 2 and a white, human elf cleric, 3/2. Has divine intervention. When Moon Blessed Cleric enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an enchantment card, reveal it, and put it on top of your library. So for me, this again was a huge miss. I saw this for the first time. I totally missed it when the set came out. And I think maybe because Forgotten Realms I wasn't overly impressed with in general. But I was doing a patron deck for one of my patrons and they had this in there. And I was like, wait, what does that do? I was like, holy cow, it's a new card in the format that tutors for enchantments. That's why this is number 1 for me, because it's filling that niche where I'm in white. And of course, white doesn't tutor very well. It does tutor for enchantments okay. There are a couple of cards that do it. This is another option for you. Now, if you're in a deck, if you're in just a mono white deck that, mono white maybe struggles a little, so some people say anyway, I can go get my Smothering Tithe with this and give myself a bit of an advantage so I can catch up with my opponents. You can even just do that. This can just be, I have 1 or 2 really good enchantments in my deck that I want to go get, and this is a way to do it. But also, of course, in that enchantment tribal deck, it's going to be probably an auto include, I imagine. In that aura deck, like this goes and gets auras, right? This goes and gets curses. This goes and gets a lot of different things because a lot of enchantments are really, really impactful in the format. So this fits in so many decks. I think this fits in the Boros Aura and Equipment deck. I think this fits in the Gen deck, right? Because obviously you're doing enchantments there. And it also goes in the fringe, I need a certain enchantment in my deck because it fits with what my commander's doing. So I need to go get that specific enchantment. It also fits there. It just goes in a ton of decks. I am embarrassed to say that I missed it. It definitely is going to see a lot of play in the format going forward. But what else did I miss? Mention below if there's other cards that of all the lists, I did 4 total lists of the best cards of the year for the format. I had my removal video because I needed to do specifically a removal video because of all the great removal this year. I had my top 20 commanders. I had my top 20 cards. And could some of the cards on this list sneak into that list? Possibly. I wanted to separate them. I wanted to separate them into the top 20 cards of the year that were already on lists that I did prior in the year. And then this list was cards that I think I missed. Maybe a lot of other people did. Some of these cards definitely got a mention by some people, like Welcoming Vampire got a whole lot of mention, maybe more than it should. I think it's definitely a good card. All these cards for sure are very playable in the format, and I think we're going to see them all from time to time at the very least going forward. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.